with our recording. I'll begin first just with a short introduction to myself. My name is Patria Malone. I'm an advocacy project worker with Inclusion Ireland. And I've been with Inclusion for 5 years. And in those 5 years, I have worked pretty steadily with the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disability as a guide and as a support. And I pointed many people to the convention because it's important that we have an understanding as we progress the rights of people with disability, that we utilize this convention, which is worldwide. And I'll show you today the vast support for the convention in the world, which is pretty remarkable as far as UN conventions go. Again, just for those who just joined us, this is being recorded and will be on our social media channels, especially if you have to leave at any point as well. Thank you for those of you who've introduced yourselves. Again, if you like, in the chat function to introduce yourself and let us know perhaps what part of the country that you are from. Without further ado, I am going to share my screen and begin. So, before I begin and launch into the United Nations Convention, I just want to point out to you in using Zoom, there are a few functions which I mentioned earlier that we are going to keep on mute just because the hearing is compromised, the sound is compromised if we have our microphones on. We're going to have an option of keeping your video on or off. And excuse me, just moving across, if you look on your control panel, you'll see there's the chat option as a way of asking questions. So today what we're looking at is as has been mentioned, United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. I will refer to the convention as the CRPD, CRPD, as I go forward, just to save us a bit of time. You'll hear it referred to as the UNCRPD as well, United Nations Convention on Rights of Persons with Disability. Just for today, I'll refer to it as the CRPD. And what are we going to do today? Our agenda today is rather simple. We are going to look at who the CRPD is for, why is it important, and what does it entail? So today, I'm not going to go into the how in terms of implementation. This is the job of hundreds of people at the UN and also hundreds of people, well, maybe tens of people here in Ireland who are administering and making sure we apply Irish law to the CRPD. So today we're going to look at who is it for, why is it important, and what is involved. So first of all, who is it for? It's for everyone. It's for every citizen of Ireland. It's for people with disabilities, family members, disability organizations, civil society, which includes all community groups, clubs, government. Why is it important? For people to work towards equal rights, we need to have guidance. We need to work towards bringing forward areas in which we are not given our human rights. And so the CRPD gives us that opportunity to look at human rights protections that are across the world. It addresses the rights of 650 million persons in the world with disability, 650 million. And in addition to that, it impacts the lives of over 2 billion persons, including family members, people who work with people with disabilities. So this convention covers the interests of many, many people. What is the convention? It's international. It's essentially an agreement made within countries to follow a certain line of rights that are called to be respected. It affects the world, as I've said before, and within what we're going to examine today, it has 50 what we call articles. 50 articles. So those 50 articles are some of what we're going to be looking at today. Before I go any further, I want you to know that and there are many human rights instruments within the United Nations. An instrument is basically a written agreement or a tool to be used by a country. But this convention, the CRPD, was one of the most quickly supported human rights instruments in history. And I think that attests to the fact that the voice of the person with disability and his or her family members are becoming more courageous in speaking out about rights. So who are we at Inclusion Ireland? We are a national organization for people with intellectual disability and their family members. We began in 1961, and we began by a group of family members who were very concerned about the rights of people with intellectual disability. As you can see from the two photos, we have our logo for Inclusion Ireland sitting on top of human rights. We're a rights-based organization, and we advocate for equal, equitable rights for all people. An example of this is a program that we ran in the last 2 years called 19 Stories of Social Inclusion. And I just want to highlight that program. If you have an opportunity at another time to go onto our website, you'll see videos of individuals across Ireland who were interviewed about their lives and how their lives are lived. And we feel it's very important that we look at the voice, that we have the opportunity to speak to how we're living out our rights and perhaps what the barriers are as to why our rights maybe in the past haven't been recognized and respected. Again, that's 19 Stories of Social Inclusion. So today, what I usually do is get a raise of hands in the room to see how much people know about the United Nations Convention. For those of you who are close to a computer, we're going to run a little poll. This will just take a few seconds. And in this poll that I'm now launching, I'd like you to answer the question: how much do you know about the United Nations Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities? The options are a lot, some, or a little. We'll give that a few minutes to tally, or a few seconds, excuse me, to tally. I'm going to share the results there with you so that you may see among those who have joined us today what our knowledge is of the CRPD. None of us have a whole lot of understanding, and to be honest with you, I probably put myself in the category of some as well. There's so much to know about the CRPD. We have 68% of those participating today who have some knowledge, and 32% who have a little knowledge. So with that, we'll go forward, and we'll hope by the end of our presentation today that we will have increased in our knowledge on the CRPD. So in this slide, I wanted to invite us to examine the words. If you look in the left-hand column, you see United Nations Convention, Rights of Persons with Disability. So essentially, united means it's all of us. As I mentioned before, we're looking at the rights of 650 million people worldwide, okay, impacting 2 billion people who are family members, people linked to looking at rights and implementing rights of persons with disability. Nations is all the countries, as you can see from our flags there. Convention means gathered together. It can also mean a written document, but we'll look at how we gather together to look at what are called rights or our respect in law of persons, which is all people, and all people with disabilities. So to date, there are 164 countries who have signed the CRPD. 182 have ratified the CRPD. To ratify simply means that a country has accepted responsibility, that they're going to put the laws in place to work toward the rights of people with disability. Ireland signed the convention in 2007. However, it took us 11 years before we ratified the convention. And in that time, there were many conversations, much work done behind the scenes to change law, legislation, so that people's rights would be better protected. So it took 11 years before Ireland came to a place in April of 2018 to ratify the convention. It mentions on this map something called the optional protocol, and some of you may have heard that before. I will be going into that in a later slide. So remember, in 2018, we ratified the convention. We said yes to the fact that we would agree to what is written in the convention. So what we're going to go into next is look at what is written in the convention. So there are 50 articles in the convention, 50 headlines where we have to respect the law, build law around the protection of the right. The first articles, 1 to 4, look at the purpose, the definition, the principles, and the obligations that we have as a country to respect the rights of persons with disability. So you can see here, disabled people have the same rights as everyone else. It was the first human rights convention of the 21st century, written by 2006, and the first legally binding instrument with full protection of rights with persons with disabilities. I want to point out here there were no new human rights that were defined in the convention. It just shaped those rights around the needs, particular needs of a person with disability. States have to create laws to promote, protect, and ensure those rights, as well as, and this is very important, as well as ways to support implementation and monitoring. Very important in terms of all of us here today, because we are the ones who will assist the government in looking at the ways in which the law has either been honored or perhaps there is discrimination, and to look at the monitoring to watch over how that may or may not have been respected. So Article 5 looks at equality and non-discrimination. And at the outset, I'll let you know that each of these articles have pages and pages behind them. But what I've tried to do is to, in one sentence or two, to give us the general idea of each article. And as I go through these, I'd like you to think about your own life, your own situation, and perhaps see which article that going forward, not today, we don't have the time, but going forward, you may wish to further look into that particular article because it speaks to your experience. So in Article 5, we look at equality and non-discrimination, the right to enjoy equal protection and equal benefit of the law. Article 6, looking at women with disabilities. Women and girls with disabilities are more at risk, so there should be special laws to protect them. Article 7, children with disabilities. Children with disabilities enjoy all human rights and freedoms on an equal basis with other children. I know that I'm going through these somewhat quickly. Know that, again, it will be recorded. Article 8, awareness raising. Awareness of the abilities and contributions of persons with disabilities, that it takes each one of us to be a whole. Respect for the rights and dignity of the person, and to fight stereotypes. As we can see here in the photo, people with disability and their supporters fighting for their rights. Article 9, accessibility. The right to accessible buildings, roads, transport, schools, hospitals, workplaces, businesses, services, public spaces, information and technology, so people with disability may live independently and participate fully in all aspects of life. Here, and I'm located in the Midlands. Here in the Midlands, I facilitate a conversation group. And I have to say that this is an area within our conversation group that we question constantly in terms of access. As you can see here from the picture, this individual who's a wheelchair user does not have access, obviously. Another way that we find often people do not have access is they don't have accessible information. And that's something that we do at Inclusion Ireland. Try to create accessible information, because once we have information, it's powerful. Article 10 is right to life. Every human being has the right to life and to enjoyment by persons with disabilities on an equal basis with others. Article 15, in situations of risk and humanitarian or human emergencies. In times of risk, conflict, emergency, or natural disaster, we take all necessary measures to ensure the protection and safety of persons with disability. Important here is, especially during this time of COVID, our work at Inclusion Ireland has included many queries, concerns about people with disability who, during this time of human emergency, who are not being afforded their full and human rights, oftentimes hiding behind language of what we call vulnerability. We all have vulnerability. We all are at risk, and we have to recognize that with these risks, it's important that we look at the human needs at all times and not hide behind any language that would leave us excluded. Equal recognition before the law is Article 12. The right to be seen equally as a person before the law, to legal capacity, to own property, to control our own financial affairs, and to have safeguards to prevent abuse. Article 13, access to justice. The right to access to justice and necessary supports in all legal situations, training for those working in jobs connected to justice. And just so you know, I'm not going to be going through all 50 articles. I've chosen 30 that kind of speak to our experience, and the remaining speak more to the convention itself and how each country has an obligation to correct the laws, to have laws in place. So Article 14 is liberty and security of person, the right to liberty and security on an equal basis with others. Having a disability does not mean that someone has to give up their freedom. I think with each of these, we could come up with examples and stories, and we could likely spend hours on each of these articles. Article 15 is freedom from torture, inhuman or poor treatment or punishment. No one shall be put through torture, cruel, inhuman, poor treatment or punishment. A right for persons with disabilities on an equal basis with others. Article 16, freedom from exploitation, violence, and abuse. The right to protection from all forms of ill treatment, violence, and abuse. All services to persons with disabilities will be independently monitored. Article 17, protecting the integrity or the fullness of the person. The right to respect for physical and mental wellness on an equal basis with others. Article 18, the liberty of movement and nationality. The right to freedom of movement, freedom to choose our own home, and freedom of belonging to a country or a nation. Article 19, living independently and inclusion in the community. The right to live in the community, to be included, to participate in society, to choose our own place of residence and where and with whom we live, and to choose our own supports. As I mentioned earlier, Inclusion Ireland has taken Article 19 and created the 19 stories of social inclusion, looking at the ways that people have made choices to live in the community. And that's on our website if you'd like to see some video clips of living in the community. Article 20 looks at personal mobility. We have an individual here being supported on the Dublin bus to get around the city, the right to personal mobility with the greatest possible independence in the manner and time and choice and at affordable cost. This is an area that I hear frequently individuals do not have access to transport. Article 21, looking at the freedom of expression and opinion, the right to use one's voice. My voice, my choice, as we often hear. The right to information and ideas through accessible information, which I mentioned before. Accessible information being often documents in plain English or documents such as this here with photos to support understanding, easy to read format. Article 22, looking at the respect for privacy. The right to protection of the law against unlawful involvement with privacy, family, correspondence or communication, and unlawful attacks on honor or a person's good name. Article 23, again, a very important one. Oftentimes a concern, many concerns come under this certain article in respect for home and the family. So the right to marry, to have a family, sexual rights, family planning, education, and for a child to remain in a family if either the child or one or both of the parents may be disabled. Article 24, education. The right to education without discrimination and on the equal basis of equal opportunity. Inclusive education at all levels in the communities, and very importantly, in which people live. Article 25, looking at our health. The right to the best standard of healthcare without discrimination, affordable healthcare as provided to others, healthcare needed by persons with disabilities specifically because of their disabilities. Again, a very important article. Article 26 on habilitation and rehabilitation. So what this one essentially means is having access to improve our abilities, our capacities. The right to maximum independence, full physical, mental, and social and work placement, full inclusion and participation in all aspects of life through services and programs, particularly in the areas of health, employment, education, and social services. Article 27, work and employment. The right to work on an equal basis with others, the opportunity to gain a living by work in a work environment that is open, inclusive, and accessible, work placement services, and reasonable accommodation in the workplace. And as you can see here, a lovely smiling picture of my colleague, Paul Alford, who assisted me greatly with this presentation. Article 28, and we're nearly there, folks. We're on the last couple slides. Adequate standard of living and social protection. So this is the right to a good standard of living, including food, clothing, and housing, public housing programs, retirement benefits, access to assistance with disability-related expenses, training, counseling, financial assistance, and respite care. So this particular article looks at a standard of living, the social protection within a country. Article 29, looking at participation in political and public life. So it's the right to vote and be elected, the right to participate in non-governmental organizations and associations in public and political life, to participate in activities of political parties, and to influence government. In this photo, we have our Midlands Conversation Group made up of advocates within the Midlands area, whereby they took the public sector duty, which is an obligation of the government to make the government accessible through housing, employment. They took this to the county council in Offaly, and here they are having presented this to our local county council. Article 30, participation in cultural life, recreation, leisure, and sport. The right to access to television programs, theater, music, museums, places of cultural activity, to develop and use creative, artistic, and intellectual ability, participate as best possible in mainstream sporting, participate in disability-specific sporting and recreational activities. And the final articles from 31 to 50 are how countries, I call them the how-to articles because they document and they record how the CRPD, how the convention needs to be monitored, looked out for by the society and the government. So how countries are to work to use the convention, the CRPD, to improve the rights of people with disabilities, how to gather information, how to work together and express concerns, how to report information and use accessible formats, and how to make changes to written information. That has been a whirlwind tour, and I understand it's a lot of information, articles 1 to 50. So this was a walk through the various articles that are written in a very, very long document. But I asked you earlier to think about your own life, barriers, obstacles, difficulties that you've had in trying to get services, maybe healthcare, could be education. Each one of these articles would speak to your situation. And I often work with people, advocate with people to look at the ways in which the barriers or obstacles that we have in trying to live a good life, a supported life in community. Look at those ways in which this convention, the CRPD, can help us. So the optional protocol is linked to the CRPD in that many countries will ratify both the convention, both the CRPD and what's called the optional protocol at the same time. Ireland chose to wait because there were further questions that the government had in terms of legislation and being compliant with legislation. So the optional protocol, as I've written here, is many human rights conventions have an extra agreement that countries can choose to sign after the main agreement. The optional protocol was created in 2008, and it has 18 further articles that describe how a country has to apply, has to work within the protocol. It's called a complaints mechanism because it needs to be signed for a country or a committee within a country to report concerns to the United Nations. So far, there are 96 countries that have ratified and 96 countries that have signed. So you can see there's a lot of work to be done yet on the optional protocol to get countries to a place where they feel secure in their legislation to ratify the optional protocol and give the people of the country a voice, a further voice to work towards equal rights for people with disability. Ireland has yet to sign an optional protocol. Government indicated that upon the first review of the CRPD in Ireland, which was to have been this year, however, was postponed due to our time with COVID. It's now postponed till 2021. And the government said that by the time the review came, that they would be ready to ratify the optional protocol. So it's something that the government and we all as a people have to work toward keeping the optional protocol within government so that it continues to be brought to the Oireachtas. It has been brought to government buildings and in conversation many, many times. But we need to keep the pressure on to ratify what's called the optional protocol. Just a couple more things. I have about 3 more slides. If you have any questions at this point, if you could put them into the chat function, and my colleague Alex will help me to look at those questions in a moment. I'd like to move on to what's called the shadow report. For those of you who have some knowledge of the CRPD, you may have come across this language of what's called the shadow report. And you can help write a report about how Ireland is doing on the work of rights of persons with a disability. And this report goes to the United Nations. Ireland is to report through the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission, also known as IREC, in 2021. They are tasked, the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission, they have been given the job of working together with the Irish state, with Irish civil society, that's all of us, and disabled persons organizations to critique the rights of persons with disability in Ireland. So this report has to be written and reported on to the United Nations Committee every 4 years. So Ireland, since we signed in April of 2018, we were due to have a review in 2020, which has now been pushed out to 2021. After that review, there will be a report written every 4 years by every country that has ratified the convention. And this is called a shadow report. The Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission, IREC, they have created a disability advisory committee. In 2019, 11 disabled people were elected, and together with 3 IREC commission members, they report to the government on how the government can better protect the rights of people with disability. We, each one of us, can send reports to the committee at IREC. And just to inform you, we at Inclusion Ireland will be consulting with people in early 2021 to feed into these reports. And in that consultation, we will be notifying those of you who are interested of the ways in which we will consult, either through survey, through virtual meetings, hopefully in-person meetings around the rights of persons with disability. And it's really important in these reports that we say which rights of the convention have not been met. So as I have shared today, if you've seen a particular article, maybe it was in education, and you have an issue with education, perhaps there's a right that has not been met, and that needs to be brought forward. I wanted to mention too, because this is good for Ireland, that Ireland has a special place in that Mr. Jared Quinn from the National University of Galway Centre for Disability Law and Policy has been appointed the Special Rapporteur on Rights of Persons with Disabilities by the Human Rights Council just in October there, 2020. And his role is to voice the need for persons with disabilities to be guaranteed full enjoyment of human rights. It's linked to the CRPD, but his role is to use a different guideline called the Standard Rules of Equalization of Opportunities for people with disabilities, and link this with the CRPD. Excuse me, but I thought it important that we know that within our own country, we have a rapporteur. It's an honor, a position that we can use in terms of advancing the rights. And Jared is a very passionate and strong advocate here for Ireland, and will be for all people with disability. So by way of summary, I'm just going to throw out that image. It's a nice colorful image that highlights the various articles. It's been put together by a group in the USA, looking at the various rights in a very colorful way as we move forward in our advocacy work. And just the last thing as a note, within Inclusion Ireland, we would like to invite each of you to join us to build a movement of change. Our members, some of you are members, are a key part of the organization, and together with our members, we use a collective voice to build a movement of change. And you can see there, as a member, you'll be able to attend events, receive regular updates on issues and events through our newsletters and emails, access to our information and advocacy supports, consulted on to gather views, and invited to join our AGM and have voting rights. Most importantly, we want to invite you to be part of a movement for change where all people's rights are equally respected. So if you, in your email that you received with the link, the Zoom link, you'll have the info at Inclusion Ireland email address. If you would like to become a member, you can reply in that regard. And Alex, our administrative assistant in the office in Dublin, will take that information and get you signed up. So I'm going to stop that share at the moment, and I'm going to see if we have any questions that I can address. Okay, one question that was asked in the chat was wondering, will the government ratify the convention? So just in terms of language, the Irish government did ratify the CRPD in April of 2018. And what's important to note is that the government has not ratified the optional protocol, which is what they call a mechanism, what we need in order to report our concerns to the UN. So this is something going forward that we all need to work toward. We need to bring forward to our local government. Perhaps you have an ear of a TD. Bring to government the optional protocol we as an Irish people, we need to ratify in order to have an opportunity for the committee to report. So another question we had was, who enforces? Good question. The CRPD in Ireland. The CRPD Oversight Committee is the Irish Human Rights Inequality Commission, also known as IREC. And in a follow-up email to each of you, I have collected a number of websites for your further information. And in that is one website to IREC and materials that IREC have printed in easy to read that you may use yourself, or you may, for those of you who work within a disability service, may wish to use within your service. So the enforcement of the CRPD has to do with how we move forward in our concerns and registering our concerns and complaints to IREC. You're going to see, if you haven't already, there's going to be further invitations for people with disability to be on consultative committees. Currently, there's recruiting going on at the moment within the government to get individuals with disability who may wish to have voice. And again, that will be in a follow-up email that we send on today. The deadline for that is the 27th, so this week. If you're interested in having a voice and know somebody who may be on a committee level, I would suggest that you link in to that opportunity. It's a good opportunity to be able to speak, use your voice, use your personal experience, because your personal experience is very powerful in terms of what we call a narrative or a story. Sharing your story to government can have a great impact. So any opportunity we have to do that is vital. Have we any further questions about if the chat function isn't working for you, if you'd like to unmute, you're welcome to do that. I see, Gary, you've unmuted. Have you a question?
I have, yeah. The last one, I'm very interested in the last one.
You're interested in the consultative committee, Gary?
Yes.
Terrific. So that will be in the email that we send on to you. You'll see it comes from the government through the Department of Children, Equality, Disability, Integration, and Youth. So our new government department, they have put forward this launch on the Disability Participation and Consultative Network. So in that email we send on, Gary, you'll see the links to that.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Patria?
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, if you joined that group, yeah, would you be listening to and taking on board what you say? That's why sometimes, yeah, when the government say they do things, they don't do them. Yeah, what they promise.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for that question. Yeah, Paul's question was, if we join a committee, will we be heard? I think just like Article 19 of living in the community, we have to ask many times, we have to speak quite often. And the fact that we have close to 30 people here today, that makes our voice much stronger. We have 30 people who are interested in the CRPD. We have 30 people who are interested in the rights of people with disability. And you're right, Paul, we need to combine our voices so that
Yeah.
we are heard.
Yeah, to be heard. Yeah, really, at the end of the day, and to be taken on board, not just say they'll do something and don't come back to disability people and help them, yeah, with their problems.
Correct, Paul, thank you.
Yeah, and they should be listened to the whole time. And why promise? And then if you promise something, you should keep your promise.
Absolutely. And that
Yeah.
being said, Paul, I just would like to emphasize that when we do make these requests of government, that we need to put them into writing as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, in writing. Yeah,
Um,
a little note to them. Yeah, to say what you want.
Exactly.
And they have to respond to that note at the end of the day and get back to you and say, oh, yeah, we'll do this for you, we'll do that. And then you have to chase them up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you don't chase them up, you don't get your problem sorted at the end of the day.
And the point of all of these articles is that we can use them to emphasize our point. We can use the articles to say, oh, wait a minute, I do know that this ought to be in law because Ireland, we've signed this convention, the CRPD, and this is the direction we want to go.
Yeah, and the right place at the right time. Yeah, to get the voices heard.
Exactly.
To speak out to those governments that they don't do half of the things what they promise.
Exactly. Let's work toward that, Paul. Thank you.
Yeah, and then if you don't know that, you know nothing at the end of the day about the government. That's true, Patria.
Exactly.
Yes. And you want more people, like myself and other people to speak out and get those voices there. It's my voice, my choice, nothing about us without us at the end of the day.
One last thing before we sign off is that I can be contacted if you have further questions, if you'd like to follow up on any of your concerns, perhaps that have arisen today. I'd like to share with you the whiteboard. And on this whiteboard, I'd like to write out what have I learned today about the CRPD. Okay. And if I were standing in front of you, I would have a large piece of paper and we'd write out what we've learned today. For those of you who are at a computer and have access to this site, you can hit the T for text and type in your own answer. For those of you who'd like to go through chat, or if you'd like to unmute, myself or my colleague can add to this. So what have I learned today about the CRPD?
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
Have we learned anything today about the CRPD?
About the people with a disability.
Okay. I'm just putting down there we've learned about the disability participation and consultative network. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else that we've learned about the CRPD today?
Respect for people with all disability.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, to speak out for people with disabilities and get their voices heard.
Big time.
How to do that.
Okay.
What they want in life.
Getting people's voices heard.
And getting what they want in life.
Okay. And It's very important.
Yeah, it
Mhm.
is. And then what supports they get as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the right, yeah, to interview the support person and choose them themselves.
Okay.
And respect with people with all Down syndrome.
Okay. And choose supports.
Yeah,
Okay.
and to interview them yourself.
Okay. Rights of people with Down syndrome.
Yeah. And stand up for them.
Okay.
And stand up for them.
For their rights, yeah. Standing up, yeah, for their rights, yeah, that he's trying to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have, somebody else has written in here about the government, the call on the government to take action.
Yes, big time.
And to be listened to, yeah, the whole time is important to disability people.
Yeah.
Be listened to. And take.
And also Down syndrome as well.
Okay. Okay, well, that's a good start. Okay. So things that we've learned today about the CRPD. The good thing is that this information is at our fingertips. We can continue to learn about it, and we can continue to advocate and push towards our rights in our everyday, and share that with the people we live with, the people that we work with, around our particular rights. Well, I want to thank everyone for participating today. And again, I thank you for your enthusiasm. If there's any of these articles that you would like to examine further, if you let myself or my colleague Alex let him know, and we can certainly and happily get back to you. All right. Meanwhile, wish you the best, and we will be sending on that information this afternoon together with an evaluation. If you would take a few moments, the evaluation itself should take no more than 5 minutes, just to give us some feedback on further webinars that we may do like this that may support our work around rights. Okay. Thank you
Yeah.
now.
Oh, Patria.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Patria,
Bye.
I want to apologize for being late. Yeah, because my internet was down. Yeah,
No
and I
worries.
get into it. Yeah, that's why.